Watch them chop it up and make you feel the groove. Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Hello, welcome back. Here we are, lesson 5, where we are going to take a deep dive into the major scale, part 1. And giddy up, here we go. Today's objective is to explore more deeply the major scale. All of them. And so you might be wondering, what is that pattern again that we just learned in a previous lesson? And I just wanted to show you kind of a couple representations of it. So to our left here, you're going to see a vertical representation. And vertical works really well with pitch because it sounds like we're going up, right? And it sounds like we're going down lower. So that works out really well. So here we have really high, and down here we have low. Now what we're going to do is slide this over to its side. So imagine this whole thing boop, 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 lying on its side. To the right, in our examples today, is going to sound higher, and to the left is going to sound lower. So just a reminder on what the major scale sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Okay. Now, how many of these are there? You have to excuse me, I have some allergy issues today, so I'll be taking a lot of sips of water. Okay, so how many of these do we have to learn? That's a good question. Like, how many major scales are there? Well, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Well, there are 12 pitch classes, right? 12 different pitches or pitch classes, right? So like all the A's are in a pitch class. They sound the same. They sound samey. And that's because basically if I play like a low A and then I play the next A above that, there's something same about it, right? If I move one of those notes off a half step, it doesn't sound like that anymore. Or the other way even. Sounds even worse, right? But when it's the same pitch class, they sound samey. And that's because for like a note to sound like the same note in the next register, the frequency is literally doubled. So that's how that works. Now, it gets a little confusing here because you see this C sharp and D flat. Well, there's two different note names, but they are one pitch, right? They're in the same pitch class with two different names. And today we're going to learn also why that needs two names. Why sometimes we'll call a note by a name we wouldn't think we would call it. Okay, so here below, I have basically kind of like a chromatic scale. And chromatic just means like a 12-tone scale. Like every note until you get to the next note in the same pitch class, right? And so we're gonna fill this out, and we're just gonna try A. So here we have A and A, right? So we're gonna fill in all the notes in between. So the next note on our grid, a semitone above A, is going to be A sharp or B flat, right? Then the next note, looking at our grid up here, right? What's a step above this? A B. And we could just go down the line and kind of fill those in. Right? So we have here all 12 pitch classes represented. So are there 12 major keys? Is that the answer? Is the answer 12 different scales? Not so easy though, right? Because here we're gonna try a little bit of math here. We have 7 notes that don't have any accidentals. It's just the letter names, right? A through G. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then you have 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that have a couple different names. And that adds up to 12, right? So 12, right? 12 pitch classes. You got 7 letter names, 5 black of the black keys. So 12, right? Well, problem is these have a couple different names. So we have all the sharps, right? So, okay, so we have 7 notes that don't have any sharps or flats. And then we have 5 that have sharps and 5 that have flats. Okay, so maybe it's this answer. Maybe it's 7 plus 5 plus 5. So 17. Are there 17 different major scales? Nope. There are only 15. And by the end of this lesson, you'll know why. So here we have a laid down representation of the major scale, right? And the major scale pattern is basically whole step, half step, right? That's our first tetrachord. That's what we learned in a previous lesson. It's just 4 consecutive notes. It's the major tetrachord where you have a whole step, half step, right? And then the top of the major scale is the same thing, whole step, half step. And these two are separated, these 2 tetrachords, this one and this one are separated by a whole step. And that pattern, these 2 tiny baby scales called the major tetrachord, put together a whole step apart gives you the major scale. Okay, so we're going to start off with a C major scale. Okay, we're going to fill in some notes. So what is a whole step above C? Okay, not a half step, but a whole step is D. What's a whole step above D? Not a half step, not a semitone, not even a minor second, right? We need 2 semitones or a whole step or a tone above D is E. Now here we get off easy, right? We have from 3 to 4 is a half step, and E and F happen to not even have a note in between them. They're right next to each other. So bam, that is easy. Okay, now a whole step above F, semitone, or a whole step, or a major second above F is going to be a G. Whole step above G, 1, 2, gives us A. Whole step above A, 1, 2, gives us B. And B and C, again, are a half step apart. This is why people start with the C major scale so often. Because if someone hops on a piano and goes from C all the way up to C without playing any of these black keys, they're going to play a C major scale, and it's going to sound good. Here's a C major scale. It's easier on piano than guitar, but it's not hard on guitar, and we'll learn it. Okay, so let's do another one of these. We can start on any of these notes, right? So, and we're going to explore all of them. So sit back and relax. Here's a G major scale. So let's say we're starting on G. What is a whole step above G? Well, it's A. And then B, half step to C, whole step to D, whole step to E. Now, I kind of sped through that because this is easy. These are all, they just fit a pattern. Whole step, half step. Whole step, whole step. Uh-oh. We need a whole step above E. We can't just use F. So what are we going to put there? Should we call it G flat? It's this note right here, right? Whole step above E is here. 1 semitone, 2 semitones. So here we are. This is our note. And the question is, do we call it G flat or F sharp? Well, the answer is F sharp. You got it. Good job. And the reason we call it F sharp is because every letter has to be represented once with these major scales. So you're not going to be like G, A, B, C, D, E, G flat, G. You're not going to have 2 G's in the same key. There's only enough room in this scale for 1 G. That's right. So F sharp, we call it. Okay. So here is, your next scale, F major scale. And as we spoke about before, every letter is represented once, right? So when you're figuring these out, you can even kind of start off with like, okay, it's every letter from F to F, right? And we know after G, it just starts over on A. So F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay, so does this look right? Yeah, that's a whole step. Cool. That's a whole step. Uh-oh, we want a half step, but A to B is a whole step. So this is where B actually is. So this is B flat. Okay. So the key of F has one flat, and it's a B flat. Okay. Find the mistakes in this example. I'm going to give you a second. Okay, I'm going to give the answer. So if you need more time, pause it. But the answer is F sharp and C sharp. There are two notes here that we have to raise, right? So F is right here, but we need a whole step. So we move that F a semitone closer to G by adding a sharp to it. Now we have F sharp. Same thing with C. B and C are right next to each other, right? But we need a whole step above B. So C, C sharp. And now we have that 7-to-1 relationship that we need in a major scale. The half step relationship between 7 and 1, which we'll talk a lot about in the next lesson. Okay. Here we have, forgive me, I have a cough I have to do. Forgive me. So here we have A sharp and or B flat. Okay. Now I put these two examples here because we're starting our scale on a B flat or an A sharp. B flat or A sharp are the exact same note, or rather they're the same pitch, but they have a different note name depending on their context. Okay, so this is one of those cases. It's like, do we use this scale? Do we use this scale? Or do we use both? Like, are there times where we use both? Okay, so let's just kind of talk about it here. Remember, you want to use every letter once. So that means you move by step by letter, right? A, B, C. Okay. So over here in this example, we just have two flats. We have a B flat and an E flat. So that is way easier than this example down here where you have A sharp, B sharp, which is actually a C, C double sharp, which we talked about in a previous lesson, which is actually just a D. So why would we want to call something C double sharp? What a pain in the butt to think about things that way. So this B flat totally wins. A sharp, we're not writing in it in the key of A sharp. For all intents and purposes, no A sharp major scale. Okay, so let's look at the key of A. Can you find the mistakes in this key? And I'm going to give you a minute. Actually, I'm not. I'm just going to let you pause it. And 3, 2, 1, whenever you're ready, here's the answer. Boom. F sharp, C sharp, and G sharp all have to be budged to the right to fit the pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, right? So we need a C sharp instead of a C. This is F. Remember, E and F are right next to each other with no black key in between it, no note in between it. So we got to budge that F over, and the same thing with the G sharp. We got to budge it over to fit the pattern. Okay, next scale here. Here we have a couple choices here. Here's another, remember the word from a previous lesson, enharmonic equivalence. That means that these two note names, D sharp and E flat, are the same pitch. We just have to call them different names depending on the context. Sometimes we call it a D sharp, sometimes we call it an E flat. So the question here again is, does D sharp make sense to build a major scale off of it, or should we just call it E flat? Okay, because here in this example, we only have 3 flats. Now you might say, oh, Mr. Bonilla, it looks like there's 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Well, no, that's just the octave of E flat, right? We have B flat, E flat, and A flat. Those are our 3 flats. Now, if we were to build a major scale off the enharmonic equivalent of E flat, which is D sharp, we would have an E sharp, which, look up here at the keyboard. E sharp isn't even on this keyboard. This is an E sharp. E up a half step is here. An E sharp is F. It's the same pitch as F. And we do use E sharps. We totally do. But do we need to in this case? No, because this scale is so much easier. Look over here. To get a C letter in our imaginary D sharp major scale, we would need a C double sharp for that to happen. Dumb. That's just silly. Dumb scale. This is way better. E flat. It's just 3 flats. Easier. Okay, E major scale. Forgive me. E major scale. I just showed you because I don't want to beat a dead horse. I'm vegetarian, and frankly, I just don't think horses deserve that. Here is an E major scale, right? F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, and D sharp. 4 sharps to make this scale. And if you wanted to pause any of these to try and play these, you could play it. E, F sharp, G sharp, A, B, C sharp, D sharp, and E. You could play it. The pattern's the same. Whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. Okay, so here we have another example. G sharp or A flat. Which one makes more sense? Okay, well, there's no double accidentals in the top example. So chances are that's going to be the clear and decisive winner. Here we have an F double sharp. Oof. We got a B sharp. It's not the worst thing, right? A B sharp is just a C. And sometimes we have to call a C a B sharp. And you're going to see that today, momentarily, actually. So it does happen, but the F double sharp is kind of a deal breaker for this particular key. So we call it the key of A flat. 4 flats: B flat, E flat, A flat, and D flat. Again, you might say, "Oh, Mr. B, that has 5 flats, right?" It doesn't, right? A flat, you're just counting one time. This key has 4 flats. Key of A flat major. Okay. Now, I keep throwing around the word key. This note, which again, this is coming up very soon in our lessons, but this note here is, it's often called the tonic, but another name for it is the keynote. And that is because if a song uses this scale, it's in the key of the first note of the scale. That's why they call this the keynote sometimes. I mean, that's a name for this. So that's why I keep saying key. Like, songs tend to use a key. They're in a key. They're either in a major key or a minor key. Now, we're exploring the major side today, but there are minor keys that we're going to have to explore as well. So here's the key of B or C flat. Now, down here we have no double accidentals. Cool. Up here we have less accidentals, right? We have B and E natural. Well, that's kind of cool. So this top key only has 7, or rather, this top key only has 5 sharps, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But the bottom one has 7 flats. Everything is flat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So, do you think it's B and C flat major scale, or B or C flat? Like, does B just win it outright because it has less accidentals? Or do we also have to learn the C flat? Aha. Both. We have to learn both. C flat is a scale. Now, more often than not, you're going to write things in B because it does have less accidentals. But there are times where it's just way easier to conceptualize things if you're in the key of C flat. Now, why is that? Well, a C major scale we talked about is the easiest scale on the planet, right? It's just C to C with no black keys. But if you notice down here, the key of C flat is just everything down a half step. So for some instruments, it's easier to think that way. For some instruments, like even guitar, if you're using capos, it's nice to read in C flat versus B when you're like, just starting to learn how to transpose and use capos, and you don't even know what those two things are yet. Maybe we'll talk about it. But there's a case to be made for both of these keys. That's why we use them. Okay, so our next key here, D flat and or C sharp major. Okay, so here we have D flat and or C sharp. So just like our last example here, this top key has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 flats, and our bottom key has 7 sharps. But this is basically the same thing as our last example. The key of C sharp is just the key of C with everything up a half step. Okay. Here is, I think, our last major scale. I think I got through them all. Here you have F sharp or G flat. Okay. And you'll notice here, again, I'm going to toss this word out, enharmonic equivalence, right? F sharp is the same note as G flat. G sharp is the same note as A flat. Like, these scales are identical in pitch, but they are different by letter name. Okay, so which one do you use? The top one has 6 sharps. The bottom one has 6 flats. We use them both. I, as a guitarist using capos, I love sharp keys. I love thinking about it as the key of F sharp. Choirs to me seem sweeter in the key of F sharp than the key of F. F seems like such a boring key, but F sharp is like warm and fuzzy. Yeah, these keys have different characters. Crazy, because same pattern, but they kind of feel different. Some feel brighter, some feel darker. And different musicians don't even kind of experience that the same way. Some musicians associate color to these different notes and these different keys. And I mean, I see some color. I perceive color with keys as well. But even the colors that musicians perceive are different from one another. But there is a case to be made for calling things sharp, right? But horn players, guys that play brass, they love flat. I play trombone and euphonium. We love flats. We hated sharp keys growing up. Boo to sharp keys. Flats were way easier. So both keys are super beneficial. Okay. So this is kind of what we looked at today, right? We had these examples. And I just put this keyboard up here for reference. You don't really have to look at it. But over here we had A sharp or B flat. And we had to determine if we would use one or the other, or both, right? And we did this. We put these up against each other. These are all of our black keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black keys, right? And we also looked at one example right here where we called it B or C flat, right? So we even looked at one enharmonic equivalence that wasn't even a black key, right? So you got to remember that when we're doing our final count. How many major scales are there? So here we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this guy. Okay. So, but as we went through, we realized these 3 keys were ridiculous, crazy. We had no time for that. So instead, we have a B flat, an E flat, and an A flat. Now down here, we found a reason to use both, right? So here we had 5 flats, here we had 7 sharps. But there's a case for C sharp. Here we have F sharp and G flat, both having 6 accidentals, 6 sharps, 6 flats. And here we have 5 sharps and 7 flats. But there's a case for that C flat key. Okay. Now, a word about music. So far, we haven't discussed music at all. We haven't, like, legit standard notation. I've just been using graphs and pictures and playing you examples. And that's because this kind of confuses people sometimes, these notes and lines and whatever. And I just kind of, we're just going to, while we did a deep dive into the major scale, we're just dipping our toes into music notes. Okay. The thing about music notation, standard notation, is that the line space line relationship moves by letter, right? So you have E and F. Now, you know, because you've seen a piano, that E and F don't have a note in between, right? But F and G do. But you notice it just moves by step. And that's why you want every major scale to have each letter represented once. And so that as you go up the major scale, it just looks like you're moving by step, 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 all the way up. Okay. Now, this isn't a major scale. This just happens to be all the names of the notes, right? We get 5 lines. This is a treble clef. This is what guitars read in. A lot of instruments read in this, usually the instruments that are voiced higher. And we'll get into this more later. This is also the right hand of a piano player. You know, they'll have another type of symbol, which we call a clef, for their left hand, and all the notes are in a different spot. But for right now, we're just dipping our toes in. The line notes are kind of easy to memorize because usually people will come up with a little saying like, every good boy does fine, or every good boy deserves fudge. And that's how they kind of remember the names of the letters, right? And here's an E, but if you wanted an E flat, you just throw a flat in front of that note, and then you have an E flat. That's how that works. Okay. The spaces are easy to remember. From the bottom up, they just spell the word face. Okay. So why did I just want us to dip our toes into that? Because I need you to kind of understand this thing. At the very beginning of music pieces, we get this thing here called a key signature. And a key signature is just where we tell the person reading the music, hey, guess what? These are the notes that, unless told otherwise, are going to be sharp or flat. Okay. So as you learned, the major scales, none of the major scales had both sharps and flats. Like, they either had sharps or they had flats. Now, you don't get the same courtesy necessarily with crazier scales, but the major scale is like that. You're not going to have both within the same scale, right? You might have like 2 enharmonic equivalent versions of the same pitches, right? Like the key of F sharp major scale and the G flat major scale. Those are all the same pitches. It's going to sound the same, but it's not going to have sharps and flats in the same major scale. It just doesn't happen. So here in this example, we have the key of C. Now, you can just take my word for it. When you have this one line below, when this symbol is at the beginning, you have one line below, that's a C. We actually call it middle C if you're on a piano. Here's C right here. Right? So we're just going C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, B, A, G, F, E, D, C. Up and down. Now, over here, we have the key of C sharp. And you'll notice, right, you have 7. Oh, where did we go? I hit my mouse in a weird way. Okay. Right here, we have C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F sharp. All of these notes are sharp. Now, they look exactly the same as the scale up here, but the difference is over here on this side, this is saying, hey, these are the notes that need to be sharp. Now, this looks crazy, and we're going to cover this some more. But you just have to trust me. This is F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, and B sharp. That's all 7. Now, it's in a very specific order, which you don't know anything about yet, but you're going to know. It's a very important order. It's called the order of sharps. The sharps always go in this order. And we're going to cover that in a future lesson. But you can see this is 7. There's only 7 letters of the alphabet. This means everything is sharp. So even though these two look exactly the same, this is the key of C sharp. This is the key of C. C sharp. And then down here, we have, down here we have the exact same scale by appearance, except for you have 7 flats here. This is the key of C flat. So this is the same thing as this, but every single note is flat. And this order is very super specific. The flats always occur in this order. And I can't wait to show you about that. It's going to have to wait for another lesson. It's not this lesson. I just wanted to point this out because this next image here is called the circle of fifths. And I'm not even going to explain to you today why we call this the circle of fifths. I'm not even going to tell you how we use it or the benefits of it, because we're going to cover that later. I'm not going to tell you about these green notes. We're just going to worry about these outside notes. See, because it says major. So these are all of the major scales, all the major keys, right? And I love this circle of fifths. There's so many benefits to it, and we're going to cover it. But what's cool about it is you can see here, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. It's not the end yet. 15. We have 15 of these burgundy or magenta letter names for the major key, right? And you can see how here you have the 2 enharmonic equivalents, right? You have B and C flat. Same pitches, same pitch class, but written differently. Here you have the 2 that have 6 flats and 6 sharps. Boom. Right? Here you have the key of D flat and the key of C sharp. And I mean, one thing I'll explain is you're going to notice like the key of C has this lightning bolt, which means no sharps, no flats. And as you go right around the circle of fifths, you keep adding sharps. Like here's 1 sharp, here's 2 sharps, here's 3 sharps. And remember how I said these happen in an order? Like that's always going to be the first sharp in your key signature. An F sharp, that top line. Every good boy does fine, right? F sharp. Down here in this key that now has 2 sharps, look at what the first one is. It's F sharp. It's always going to be the first sharp. And then the second sharp is C sharp. Then as you go down, F sharp, C sharp, G sharp. They always stack in that order. As we go left around the circle of fifths, we pick up a flat. The key of F has 1 flat. B flat. Every good boy. B flat. As you go left, notice what the first flat is. Same flat. Every good boy, B flat. And then you go up here to E flat. F, A, C, E. That little flat note head, or that round part of the flat is on the E space. So it's B flat and E flat. And what are the first 2 here? B flat, E flat, and then we add A flat, F, A, right? So I just want you to look at this. We're going to do so much more with this. It's really going to open your eyes to some stuff, which is really cool. But these are the 15, these burgundy letters are the 15 major scales. Now, on guitar, which we're going to cover, when we play it on guitar, you learn a pattern, and then you can move that pattern around. And then you learn another pattern. You can move that. You can learn a couple different ways to play a major scale, a few different ways actually. And those patterns are movable. You just kind of like shift your hand. And so like, let's say I learn a C major scale. Okay. If I just slide my hand up, like here's a C major scale. If I just slide my hand up 1/2 step, it's a C sharp major scale. Same exact pattern. Up another 1/2 step, here's a D major scale. Up another 1/2 step, here's D sharp, or E flat, rather, because remember we call it an E flat major scale. Same pattern. I don't have to learn something so different. Now on piano, it's a little different, right? Not all the scales even have the same fingerings. Some scales start with your thumb of your right hand. Some start with your first finger. Some start with your second finger. And we're going to cover those too, because you're going to want to learn all of those. But the pattern, whole, whole, half, whole step to the next tetrachord, whole, whole, half, is the same for all of these major scales. That, my friends, is the end of the lesson. You did it. You survived. And we're going to keep this pace. We're going to, it's not easy. It's going to start getting pretty hard pretty quick. But I'll tell you, if you're having any difficulty with this, you can pause. You can rewatch. Currently, I'm going through a podcast called Philosophize This. And it just basically goes through the history of philosophy. And I can't just listen to these things one time and then all of a sudden get it. I have to go back and listen to this thing a few times to really sink my teeth into it. I've once heard it said, although I can't back this up with any sort of reference or proof, that you have to hear something or learn something 6 times for you to really, really, truly understand something. So if you have made it through this video and you're like, this is way too hard, try at least watching it 5 more times before you give up. And I know that's such a commitment. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's a big commitment. I get it. But the benefits that you get from music theory, if you're interested in being a musician, the benefits that you get from really learning this stuff are immeasurable. Okay. So thank you very much, and we'll see you very soon.